Alright, in this video, we're going to have a conversation about the most dominant schema that was present in my own personality system when I started to do this work a number of years ago. This schema activates stories that can leave those of us that experience it left in a system that's filled with shame, sadness, loneliness, and guilt. And it's often the driving force behind all of those ineffective coping mechanisms that we're using to escape from that emotional experience that we fear the most. So today, let's have a conversation about the schema of defectiveness. When the schema of defectiveness gets activated within our personality system, we're usually filled with shame. This schema generally leaves us believing that we're flawed, that we're bad or evil at our core, that we're inferior to the people around us, or that we're completely worthless in some way. Our thoughts are dominated by our own internal critics, both punitive and demanding, which only contribute to the belief that we'll be rejected in some way if our deficiencies are exposed. This sense of defectiveness is constantly activating a debilitating fear in our system that revolves around our ineffective coping mechanisms for the shame that we'll feel should these self-perceived defects be put out there for everybody in the world to see. It might be the case that we're able to keep these character defects hidden away and private so that they're rarely shared with other people. Things like our own selfishness, our aggressive impulses, or maybe even our unacceptable sexual urges. At the same time, we may believe that these self-generated flaws are actually available for other people to see right out there in the world. Things like our belief that we've got a really unattractive appearance, or our own sense of social awkwardness that shows up whenever we're engaging in communal activities. This schema is predominantly developed because of exposure to excessive criticism and judgment as a child. Now, whether this criticism is perceived or if it's real is completely irrelevant at the time of the experience. It's also incredibly important to recognize that the schema of defectiveness can be created as a result of sexual or physical abuse in your early years. This can leave you with the experience of toxic shame due to the extremely inaccurate internal narrative that the abuse was actually your fault. It's also true that this schema may be generated as a result of parents that separated in our early years and an activated story of blame for the separation being down to you. This is despite the fact that you were extremely young at the time that it happened, and it's definitely not your responsibility in any way, shape, or form. For me, the schema of defectiveness was one of the most dominant schemas in my personality system. It was more often than not the primary schema that was the driving force behind every other story that followed on from it. This schema was also the reason I was left with a personality system that was filled with toxic shame, and it was responsible for the internal narrative that gave me all the proof I needed for the reasons I was lonely, why I was an imposter, and why I would never be able to achieve the things I wanted to achieve because, after all, there was clearly something wrong with me. The emotion of shame was also the trigger for most of my avoidant behaviours. The mere suggestion of its possibility would send my system into a state of panic that had me trapped in all of my addictive, compulsive, and obsessive coping mechanisms. Toxic shame is only possible in our system if our own internal critics are pointing out all of our defectiveness. Unfortunately, while shame is definitely a necessary emotion for all of us to experience when it's justified, most of us have an awful relationship with it, and this is mainly because of the way it was used to control our behaviour when we were children. The emotion of shame itself is not the problem though. It's the perception of what the emotion will do to us and its impact on our own internal vulnerable child that causes a strong desire to escape from the toxic reality that we've now created. Out of all the emotions we struggle with, shame is probably the one that people identify as the most problematic. If it is perceived as a problem, it's usually deep-rooted in our childhood experiences. And it's because of this toxic relationship that we develop parts of our personality that will do almost anything to avoid its presence in our system. When dealing with shame, there's a few different ways that it can manifest in our behaviours. Regardless of how our system has learned to cope with the existence of shame, it's important to recognise its presence. Without this awareness, we'll just continue to act with automatic behaviours that lead us to the exact same unhealthy outcomes. Building awareness for the stories associated with this schema provides the possibility for change change, and it leads us in the direction that we're heading to live the life we want to live. At the bottom of the website page that's connected to this particular video, you're going to find a PDF that contains a worksheet to help you figure out whether the schema of defectiveness is one that plays a significant role within your own personality system. If you can, download it and take some time to work through the questions. If you've got an opinion on this or anything else to do with the integration of DBT and schema therapy, please leave a comment in the chat. I'd really like to hear your point of view. If you want to know more, come join the live online meetings that I facilitate each week on Zoom. I'll leave some links to those groups in the description below. And as always, if you like the content of this video, please subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications to get all the latest from me and the Liberation Place. I hope this video gave you some ideas on how the schema of defectiveness might be relevant for you in your own personality system. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Take care, be safe, and be well.